It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning in Pinewood Heights. This was a quiet little neighborhood where everybody knew everybody, or at least, that's what they all thought. The houses sat in neat rows, with green lawns and white fences. Kids rode bikes down the street, and old ladies waved from their porches. It was the kind of place where nothing big ever happened. Or so it seemed. Then there was Jake Carter. He was the new guy who just rolled into town. Picture this, a regular dude with a beat-up truck, pulling up to a small house on Maple Street. He had messy brown hair, a friendly smile, and a couple of cardboard boxes stacked in his arms. Jake looked like any other guy moving in, unpacking his stuff, wiping sweat off his forehead, and trying to figure out where to put his couch. The neighbors peeked out their windows, watching him. Some waved. Some whispered. "Who's that?" they asked each other. Just another new kid on the block, they decided. But here's the thing, they were wrong. Jake wasn't just some random guy with a moving truck. Oh no. He had a secret. A big, juicy secret tucked right up his sleeve. Nobody in this fancy, stuck-up neighborhood had any clue what was coming. Not the old man watering his flowers. Not the lady walking her tiny dog. Not even the kids playing tag in the yard. Jake's secret was so good, it was like a surprise party waiting to pop out and shock them all. Let me paint you a picture of Pinewood Heights so you get the vibe. It was one of those places where people cared way too much about silly rules. Like, your grass had to be short, super short. Your house had to be painted boring colors like beige or white. And don't even think about putting up a goofy mailbox or a wild flag. The people here loved their rules more than ice cream on a hot day. They had a group called the HOA, short for Homeowners Association, and they were like the bosses of the neighborhood. If you broke a rule, they'd knock on your door with a grumpy face and a big list of complaints. Jake didn't seem to care about any of that. He pulled up in his truck, humming a tune, acting like he didn't have a worry in the world. He carried boxes into his house, set up a little chair on his porch, and even waved at the nosy folks staring at him. "Hey there," he'd say with a grin. The neighbors nodded back, but they were already talking behind his back. "He seems nice," one lady said. "Too nice," said another. "I bet he's trouble," grumbled an old guy with a cane. They didn't know it yet, but Jake was about to turn their quiet little world upside down. Now, before I tell you what happens next, I've got a fun question for you. Imagine you just moved into a new place. You're unpacking your stuff, minding your own business, when bam, somebody starts sticking their nose right into your life. Maybe they're complaining about your shoes on the porch or the way you parked your bike. What would you do? Would you ignore them? Laugh it off? Or maybe give them a sneaky surprise? Drop your answer in the comments below, because I want to know. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from today: your house, your school, maybe your grandma's couch. Oh, and if you like crazy stories like this, smash that subscribe button so we can hang out more. Back to Jake. That first day, he didn't do anything wild. He just unpacked his boxes and sipped some lemonade on his porch. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and everything seemed normal. But inside Jake's head? Oh, he was planning something. You could see it in his eyes if you looked close enough, a little twinkle, like he knew something nobody else did. He wasn't loud or bossy. He didn't brag or show off. He was quiet, calm, and cool as a cucumber. That's what made him so tricky. The neighbors thought they had him all figured out, but they didn't have a clue. See, Jake wasn't just moving into Pinewood Heights to live a boring life. He had a reason for being there, a secret reason. It wasn't about unpacking boxes or planting flowers. It was something bigger, something that would make jaws drop and eyes pop wide open. But he wasn't ready to spill the beans yet. Nope. He was going to wait, watch, and let the neighborhood come to him. And trust me, they would. Especially one lady who was about to make his life very interesting. Her name was Linda Grayson, but we'll get to her soon. For now, Jake was just the new guy, the one everyone was watching, whispering about, and judging. They saw his old truck and his plain clothes and thought, he's nobody special. Boy, were they in for a shock. Jake's secret was like a treasure chest buried in his backyard, and he was the only one with the map. Every time he smiled or waved, it was like he was saying, just wait. You'll see. That sunny Saturday morning, as Jake hammered a little sign into his lawn that said Carter, the neighborhood buzzed with curiosity. Who was this guy? Why was he here? Did he know about the rules? The HOA? The grumpy folks who'd knock on his door if he stepped out of line? Jake knew. He knew it all. And he was ready for whatever they threw at him. He leaned back in his porch chair, kicked up his feet, and took another sip of lemonade. The game was on, and Jake was playing to win. So, what's the deal with Jake? Why's he so chill when everyone's already sizing him up? Stick around, because this story's about to get wild. Jake's got a secret, and when it comes out, Pinewood Heights won't know what hit it. You won't want to miss a single second of this, so keep watching. I promise it's worth it. Now, let's meet Linda Grayson. She was the big boss of the HOA, that's the Homeowners Association, the group that made all the rules in Pinewood Heights. Around the neighborhood, people called her HOA Karen, but not to her face. Jake came up with that nickname the first time he saw her, and it stuck in his head. Linda was the kind of lady who loved rules more than anything. She'd walk around with a tiny ruler in her pocket, measuring people's grass to make sure it wasn't even a teensy bit too long. If it was half an inch over the limit, bam, she'd write you a note and leave it on your door. Fix this, the note would say, all grumpy and bossy. Linda had sharp eyes and a loud voice. Her hair was always pulled back tight, and she wore big glasses that made her look like she was ready to catch you doing something wrong. Everybody in Pinewood Heights knew her. If you hung a silly Halloween decoration or parked your car a little crooked, Linda would be there, shaking her head and writing it down. She thought she was keeping the neighborhood perfect, but really, she just made everyone nervous. So, when Jake rolled into town and started unpacking, Linda was already watching. She stood on her porch across the street, arms crossed, staring at him like a hawk. At first, Jake didn't do anything to bug her. He just carried his boxes inside and waved hello. Linda waved back, but her smile was fake. She was waiting for him to mess up. And then, one day, he did big time. It happened on a sunny afternoon. Jake decided his new house needed some fun. He grabbed a can of bright, cheerful yellow paint and went to work on his mailbox. That boring old metal box? He turned it into a sunny little spot of happiness. Yellow like a lemon, yellow like the sun. He stepped back, brushed off his hands, and smiled. Looks good, he said to himself. The kids riding bikes nearby giggled and pointed. Cool mailbox, one of them yelled. Jake gave them a thumbs up. But Linda? Oh boy, Linda didn't think it was cool at all. She saw that yellow mailbox from her window, and her face turned redder than a tomato. To her, it wasn't just paint, it was a crime. The HOA had a rule, all mailboxes had to be beige. Beige. That's a boring, sandy color that blends in with everything else. Yellow. That broke the rule so hard it might as well have been a giant flashing sign saying, I don't care what you think. Linda grabbed her phone and marched across the street like she was on a mission. Her shoes clicked on the pavement, and her glasses bounced on her nose. She stopped right in front of Jake's house, pointing at the mailbox like it had just insulted her. What is that? She yelled, her voice so loud the birds in the trees flew away. Jake was on his porch, sipping lemonade, when she came storming up. He leaned against the railing, looking at her with a little smirk on his face. That color is an eyesore. Linda shouted, waving her arms. It's awful. It's against the rules. I'm calling 911 right now, this is vandalism. She held up her phone and started dialing, her fingers shaking with anger. Jake just watched her, calm as could be. Go ahead, ma'am, he said, his voice smooth and easy. Too easy. He didn't yell back. He didn't argue. He just stood there, that tiny smirk still on his lips, like he wasn't worried one bit. Linda didn't notice how chill he was. She was too busy huffing and puffing, talking into her phone. Hello, police. Yes, this is Linda Grayson from Pinewood Heights. There's a man here breaking the law. He painted his mailbox yellow. It's vandalism, I tell you. She glared at Jake while she talked, like she expected him to run away or beg her to stop. But Jake didn't move. He took another sip of his lemonade and watched her, his eyes twinkling like he knew something she didn't. The neighbors started peeking out their windows. Curtains moved, heads popped up, and whispers floated through the air. What's Linda yelling about now? One lady asked. "That new guy's in trouble already," said an old man with a chuckle. They all thought Jake was about to get a big scolding or maybe even arrested. Linda sure thought so. She hung up the phone and crossed her arms, staring at Jake with a smug look. "The cops are on their way," she said. "You're done for." Jake shrugged. "Okay," he said, "simple as that." He didn't look scared. He didn't look mad. He just leaned back and waited, like he was watching a funny show. Linda blinked at him, confused. Why wasn't he freaking out? Most people would be nervous if someone called the cops on them, especially over something silly like a mailbox. But Jake? He acted like it was no big deal. That little smirk on his face, it was driving Linda nuts. She didn't know it yet, but Jake wasn't sweating this at all. He had something up his sleeve, something that would turn this whole mess into a giant surprise. What did Jake know that Linda didn't? Why was he so calm when she was losing her mind? It's like he was playing a game, and she was walking right into it. Linda thought she had all the power with her rules and her phone calls, but Jake's cool vibe hinted at something else. Something sneaky. Something big. The tension was building, like a rubber band stretched tight, ready to snap. Linda kept glaring, her foot tapping on the ground. Jake kept smiling, his lemonade glass sweating in the sun. The air felt thick with questions. Would the cops really show up? Would they care about a yellow mailbox? And why was Jake acting like this was all a joke? The neighbors watched, holding their breath. Linda waited, sure she'd won. But Jake, he just sipped his drink and let her stew. Whatever he knew, he wasn't telling yet. He was waiting for the perfect moment, and when it came, Linda wouldn't see it coming. So, what's going to happen next? Will Linda get her way, or is Jake about to pull off something wild? Stick with me, because this story's just getting started, and the fun's about to kick up a notch. Okay, so things in Pinewood Heights were getting wilder by the day. After Linda called 911 about Jake's bright yellow mailbox, you'd think she'd chill out a little. Nope. Over the next few days, Linda turned into a one-woman detective squad. She was on a mission to catch Jake breaking rules, and she wasn't going to stop until she won. Picture this, Linda sneaking around like a spy. She'd tiptoe to her fence, peek over the top, and stare at Jake's house with her big, grumpy eyes. She carried a little notebook in her pocket, and every time she saw something she didn't like, she'd scribble it down real fast. "Yellow mailbox still there," she'd write. Or, "He waved at me suspicious." She even grabbed her phone one day and started snapping pictures of that illegal mailbox, zooming in like it was evidence for a big crime. Click, click, click. The neighbors saw her and giggled behind their curtains, but Linda didn't care. She was serious. And boy, did she love calling the cops. She dialed 911 so many times that the people on the other end started knowing her voice right away. "Hello, police. It's Linda again," she'd huff into the phone, all out of breath like she'd just run a race. "That new guy, Jake, he's breaking every rule in the book. You've got to do something." She'd pace back and forth on her porch, waiting for the police to show up and haul Jake away. She was sure they'd see that yellow mailbox and say, "Yup, this guy's trouble." But here's where it gets funny. While Linda was running around like a chicken with its head cut off, Jake, he kept his cool. Super cool. He didn't yell back at her. He didn't hide. Nope, he just went about his day like nothing was wrong. He'd see Linda spying over the fence and give her a big, friendly wave. "Hey, Linda," he'd call out, grinning like they were best buddies. Linda would scowl and scribble in her notebook even faster, but Jake didn't care. He'd grab his lawnmower, push it across his yard, and whistle a happy tune while the grass flew everywhere. And get this, every time Linda complained about that mailbox, Jake would repaint it. She'd call the HOA and say, "He's got to fix it. Make it beige." So, Jake would grab his paint can, dip his brush in that bright yellow, and slap a fresh coat right on there. It was like he was messing with her on purpose. The mailbox got yellower and yellower, and Linda got madder and madder. She'd stomp her foot and yell, "This is ridiculous," but Jake just kept smiling. Now, here's the kicker, the part that really drove Linda up the wall. Every time she called the cops, they'd show up. Sirens hooping, lights flashing, the whole deal. The neighbors would peek out, thinking, "Oh boy, Jake's in trouble now." But then something weird happened. The cops would walk up to Jake's porch, and instead of yelling at him or putting handcuffs on him, they'd chat. Yup, they'd stand there talking to Jake like old friends. Sometimes they'd even laugh. Ha ha ha, you'd hear them, joking around with Jake while Linda watched from across the street, her mouth hanging open. Then, after a few minutes, the cops would tip their hats, say, "See ya, Jake," and leave. Just like that. No arrest. No ticket. Nothing. Linda was fuming. She'd march over to the edge of her yard, hands on her hips, and screech, "Why aren't they arresting him? That mailbox is against the rules." Her face would turn all red, and she'd shake her fist at the sky like it was the most unfair thing ever. The neighbors started whispering about it. "What's going on?" they'd say. "Why do the cops keep leaving him alone?" One lady thought maybe Jake had magic powers. An old guy with a cane said, "Maybe he's paying them off." But nobody knew the real answer. Linda sure didn't. She'd stomp back into her house, muttering to herself, "I'll get him next time. I'll find proof." Meanwhile, Jake wasn't just sitting there laughing. Well, okay, he was laughing a little. But he was also watching. Every time Linda peeked over the fence, he saw her. Every time she snapped a picture, he noticed. Every time she called the cops, he'd lean back on his porch and wait, like he knew exactly what was coming. He wasn't scared. He wasn't mad. He was waiting for the perfect moment to do something big. Little did Linda know, all her spying and yelling was part of Jake's plan. She thought she was the smart one, catching him breaking rules. But Jake? He was smarter. He was letting her run around, making a fuss, while he sat back and watched her every move. It was like a game of cat and mouse, except Linda didn't realize she wasn't the cat. Jake was. And he was getting ready to pounce. The tension in Pinewood Heights was growing. Linda kept pushing, sure she'd win. She'd call the cops again and again, her voice getting louder each time. "He's mocking me," she'd tell them. "He painted it yellow again. Do something." The cops would show up, chat with Jake, and leave every single time. Linda's notebook was filling up with angry scribbles. Day 3, mailbox still yellow. Cops did nothing. Day 4, he waved at me rude. Jake didn't say much, but his little smirk said it all. He'd mow his lawn, sip his lemonade, and watch Linda lose her mind. The neighbors couldn't stop talking about it. "What's his deal?" they'd ask each other. "Why's he so chill?" Nobody had a clue, but they were starting to think Jake wasn't just some regular guy. There was something about him, something sneaky, something cool. Linda didn't see it yet. She was too busy being mad. But every time the cops left without doing anything, a tiny question popped into her head: why? She'd shake it off and keep going, but it was there. Jake knew it was there too. He was dropping little hints, like crumbs for her to follow. A wave here. A laugh there. A fresh coat of yellow paint just when she thought he'd give up. He was teasing her, leading her right where he wanted her to go. So, what was Jake up to? Why didn't the cops care about that mailbox? And why was he so calm while Linda flipped out? Something big was coming, something Linda never saw coming. Stick around, because Jake's about to shake things up, and it's going to be awesome. Okay, buckle up, because things in Pinewood Heights were about to get crazy. After days of Linda spying, yelling, and calling the cops over Jake's yellow mailbox, something big was about to happen. It was a regular Tuesday morning, sun shining, birds chirping, kids riding bikes. But Linda? She'd had enough. She was done with Jake's chill attitude and that bright, rule-breaking mailbox. She decided it was time to go all out. Linda grabbed a megaphone, yup, a real megaphone, the kind cheerleaders use at games. She marched right up to Jake's house, her shoes stomping on the sidewalk, her face redder than a fire truck. She flipped the switch on that megaphone, and her voice boomed across the whole neighborhood. "Jake Carter, you're a disgrace to this neighborhood," she shouted, so loud the windows rattled. "That mailbox is a crime. You don't belong here." She waved the megaphone around like a superhero with a weapon, glaring at Jake's house like she could knock it down with her words. The neighbors popped their heads out, some from doors, some from behind curtains. "What's Linda doing now?" they whispered. Kids stopped their bikes and stared. Even the birds went quiet. Linda kept going, yelling through that megaphone like she was the queen of Pinewood Heights. "I've called the cops 100 times, and you're still here breaking rules. This ends today." She was so mad, she didn't even notice Jake stepping outside. Jake had been inside, probably sipping his lemonade, when he heard all the noise. He peeked out the window, saw Linda with her megaphone, and thought, okay, that's it. Enough is enough. He put down his glass, brushed off his hands, and walked out onto his porch. But this time, he wasn't alone. Oh no. 2 police officers strolled out from behind his house, right behind him. They were holding coffee cups, sipping like they'd been chilling there all morning. One had a mustache, the other had a big grin, and both looked super calm like this was just another Tuesday for them. Linda's jaw dropped. Like, it fell so far it almost hit the ground. Her megaphone slipped a little in her hands, and her eyes got wide. What's going on?" she stammered, her voice shaking. She blinked at Jake, then at the cops, then back at Jake. She was so confused, she didn't know what to say. That megaphone hung by her side, quiet for once. Jake crossed his arms and grinned a big, sneaky grin that said he'd been waiting for this moment. "Oh, didn't I mention," he said, his voice smooth and cool. "I'm Officer Jake Carter undercover. Been living here to keep an eye on some shady stuff going down in Pinewood Heights." He paused, letting that sink in, then added, "And guess what, Linda? Your little 911 calls just made my job a whole lot easier." Boom. There it was, the big reveal. Linda's face went from red to white in 2 seconds flat. The neighbors gasped. Kids on bikes whispered, "Whoa." Even the old guy with the cane dropped his newspaper. Jake wasn't just some random guy with a yellow mailbox. He was a cop, an undercover cop. That means he was pretending to be a regular dude, but really, he was secretly watching the neighborhood for bad stuff. And Linda had no idea. Jake kept talking, his grin getting bigger. "See, I've been here checking things out. There's a guy in this neighborhood causing trouble, real trouble, not just painting mailboxes. And you, Linda, you've been calling the cops so much, you helped me figure out who he was." He nodded at the 2 officers, who waved their coffee cups like they were saying, "Yup, he's right." Linda blinked again, still holding that megaphone like it was her last friend. What do you mean?" she mumbled. She looked around, hoping this was a joke. But it wasn't. Jake pointed across the street, to a house where a guy named Tom lived. Tom was a quiet dude who Linda always liked. She'd even told the HOA, "Tom's a good neighbor, he follows the rules." But Jake knew better. "Tom's the troublemaker," Jake said. "He's been sneaking around, doing stuff he shouldn't. I've been watching him, but your calls about my mailbox? They got the cops coming here all the time. And guess what, they saw Tom acting shady while they were around. You accidentally helped me catch him." Jake laughed a little, and the cops nodded again, sipping their coffee like this was the best day ever. Linda's megaphone hit the ground with a thud. She couldn't believe it. All this time, she'd been yelling about Jake, thinking he was the bad guy. She'd called him a disgrace, snapped pictures of his mailbox, and bugged the cops nonstop. But Jake wasn't the problem, Tom was. And her big fuss had actually helped Jake do his job. She'd been defending the real troublemaker without even knowing it. The neighbors were buzzing now. "Jake's a cop," one lady squeaked. "Linda helped him," said a kid on a bike. The old man with the cane chuckled and picked up his paper. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. Linda just stood there, frozen, her brain trying to catch up. She'd gone too far with that megaphone, and now the truth was out. Jake wasn't just some rule breaker. He was a hero in disguise. Jake stepped off his porch, the cops right behind him. "Thanks, Linda," he said with a wink. "You made this way more fun than I expected." The officers laughed, and one of them clapped Jake on the back. "Good work, Carter," he said. They started walking toward Tom's house, ready to deal with the real bad guy. Linda watched them go, her mouth still open, her megaphone lying in the grass. The whole neighborhood was watching now. Jake's yellow mailbox glowed in the sun, like a big, happy "I told you so." Linda had thought she was the boss, the one who'd catch Jake breaking rules. But Jake? He'd been playing a bigger game all along. He'd let her yell, let her call the cops, let her think she was winning. And now, The big surprise was out. He was the good guy, and she'd helped him without even meaning to. The next day after Jake's big reveal, things in Pinewood Heights got busy fast. The sun was up, and so were the cops, Jake's buddies from the day before. They marched right over to Tom's house, the real troublemaker Linda had been defending all along. Tom didn't even see it coming. One minute he was watering his plants, acting all innocent, and the next bam, he was in handcuffs. The cops put him in their car, lights flashing, and drove him away. The neighbors watched from their porches, whispering, "Whoa, Tom was the bad guy." Linda. Oh, she didn't know what to do with herself. Her face turned redder than a cherry, and for once, she didn't say a word. No yelling, no megaphone, no nothing. She just stood there on her lawn, looking down at her feet, while the police car zoomed off with Tom. All her spying and complaining had been about Jake's silly mailbox, but she'd missed the real problem right under her nose. Talk about a big oops. Later that day, the HOA called an emergency meeting. Everyone piled into the community room, old guys, moms, even some kids tagging along. Linda was there too, but she didn't look happy. Jake strolled in, cool as ever, with a shiny police badge clipped to his shirt. He didn't need to hide who he was anymore. The neighbors stared at him, some with big smiles, some with wide eyes. He walked right up to the front, holding the HOA rulebook, the one with all those boring beige-only rules. "I think it's time we update some of these," Jake said, his voice clear and strong. He tossed the rulebook onto the table with a thud. "No more silly stuff about mailbox colors. Let's make this place fun." The room exploded with cheers. People clapped and shouted, "Yeah, Jake." The old man with the cane banged it on the floor, grinning. A lady with a baby nodded and said, "About time." They were tired of Linda's bossy ways, and Jake was like a hero fixing it all. Linda didn't cheer. She sat in the back, arms crossed, her face still red. When Jake started talking about new ideas like maybe letting kids paint murals or plant flowers, she couldn't take it. She stood up quietly and slunk out the back door, her head down. Nobody stopped her. They were too busy listening to Jake. After that, things calmed down in Pinewood Heights. Jake's mailbox stayed yellow, bright and happy, just the way he liked it. The neighbors stopped whispering and started waving again. Kids rode their bikes past Jake's house and shouted, "Cool mailbox, Officer Jake." He'd wave back, sipping his lemonade, happy to be himself. Linda learned a tough lesson. She'd thought Jake was just some new guy causing trouble, but he turned out to be the good guy. Not every stranger is who they seem, and she found that out the hard way. The neighborhood was peaceful now, and justice? Oh, it was served big time. Okay, friends, let's take a step back and think about what happened in Pinewood Heights. This whole crazy story with Jake and Linda teaches us something cool. Here's the thing, sometimes the people who yell the loudest, like Linda with her megaphone, have the most to hide. She was so busy pointing fingers at Jake, calling him a troublemaker, that she didn't even see the real bad guy, Tom, sneaking around. She thought she knew everything, but she was wrong. The loud ones can trick you sometimes. And then there's Jake, the quiet guy. He didn't yell back. He didn't fight. He just smiled, waved, and kept his secret until the perfect moment. The quiet ones. They might just be the heroes waiting to surprise you. Jake was a cop, a good guy, and he stayed calm while Linda flipped out. He didn't need to shout to show he was strong. He let his actions do the talking, and when the truth came out, everyone saw who he really was. Pretty awesome, right? So, next time someone tries to boss you around, like maybe a kid at school telling you what to do or a grown-up acting all big, stop and think. What's their secret? Are they loud because they're scared? Are they hiding something? And what about the quiet kid in the corner? Maybe they've got something cool up their sleeve, just like Jake did. You never know who's got a surprise waiting. This story's got me thinking about how we look at people. It's easy to judge someone fast, like how Linda judged Jake for his yellow mailbox. But maybe if we wait a little, watch a little, we'll see the real story. The loud ones aren't always right, and the quiet ones aren't always weak. Sometimes it's the opposite, and that's what makes life fun. You never know what's coming. I hope you liked this wild ride with Jake and Linda. It's all about staying cool, being smart, and surprising everyone when it counts. You can be like Jake too, strong and sneaky in your own way. Maybe you're the hero in your own story, waiting for the right time to shine. Don't let the loud Lindis out there stop you. Keep being you, and the truth always comes out in the end. Thanks for sticking with me, friends. I had a blast telling you this tale. What did you think of Jake's big reveal? Did it make you cheer? Drop a comment below and tell me, I want to hear. Oh, and if you loved this, stick around. I've got more wild stories coming your way. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out, and let's keep having fun together. See you next time for another big adventure.